Okay, everybody, we're gonna get started, sake of time. You'll notice we're a couple of minutes late because at this particular special seminar, we've decided to feed and water you. And so people are here, are taking advantage of that, which is fantastic. So welcome to the first weekly research conference of 2026. And there's a number of there are a number of reasons why this is special, but mostly because this is our first time that we're getting together in 2026, which is the year of our 50th anniversary at the Heart Institute. So there are going to be some really, really exciting celebratory things over the coming year. But we thought we would kick it off by having a special seminar by one of our amazing and incredibly successful and just absolutely stellar favorite researchers. But I'll get to that in a moment. One of the things that we are doing newly this year in 2026 is that our Monday research rounds that will now only be held in person. There is no longer a hybrid option. That is for a number of reasons, but number one is because the best engagement and the best networking happens in person. And particularly when we have invited speakers, we find that online it's just much, much, much harder for people to get the same value out of those types of individuals that we've invited here to the Institute from an online audience. Of course, there'll be lots of exceptions. There's going to be people who aren't going to physically join us here at the Institute. Those will be online, of course. Many of our grand round speakers, there's lots of a wider audience potentially than just within the Institute, and it's hard for people to get here sometimes. So there will be exceptions. But for the most part, Mondays at noon, we want you in this room. We want you to clear it. We want you to understand that this is what we're going to be doing. We're always going to be here Monday at noon. So please join and please bring everybody from your groups who wants to learn. Just as an aside for the trainees, when I was a student, of course, there were no online anything. But it was, I went to seminars and I learned things that I would have never done if I sort of had the option or if I was kind of half listening online while I was checking email. So it really is a chance to learn and to, really broaden your horizons and discuss and meet with individuals and researchers from across the spectrum. So please make sure to encourage all of your trainees as well to attend. Okay, so to the actual presentation today. So it is our own, very own Dr. George Wells, who is kicking off this amazing 50th anniversary year with his title being, an evolutionary tale of clinical research and clinical trials at the Heart Institute. So I don't think George needs much of an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. I actually asked if this bio was more than a couple of hours old because probably his publications and citations have skyrocketed even since maybe yesterday. But in fact, we'll do our best. George has been a pillar of clinical trials here at the Institute, and he is undoubtedly part of the reason why the research that we do here is so excellent, and we're so proud of it. He's a member of let me see if I can get all of this right. Okay, ready? The Canadian Society for Clinical Investigation. He's a distinguished scientist. He's among the top 0.03% of researchers in the world for his citations. That is a very small decimal point. He's been cited somewhere over 400,000 times. And again, we talk about impact, but the impact of that work is actually hard to measure. It's really impossible to understand. I mean, we'll hear about some of it today, but much of the work that is certainly done in clinical practice that is both here at the Institute as well as across many disciplines, including things like, device safety and other aspects, has really happened because of some of the work that George has been able to do. His consulting with private industry, the biotechnology sector, the government, the non-government organizations. I mean, it's broad and it's got very broad reach. He's an associate editor of the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, as well as for the Canadian CMAJ. He's taught graduate students, and he continues to teach graduate and undergraduate students in a very major and meaningful way, which, again, he could have said, I'm too busy changing clinical practice, but no, the impact that he has really on the trainees continues every single year. So we are so grateful to have George not only among us as one of our researchers, but here today to give us the evolutionary tale of clinical trials at the Heart Institute and to kick off our 50 years. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much, Katie. That was a very nice introduction. I hope my talk can match your presentation. I really enjoyed that. Um, yeah, this was a difficult talk to put together because I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about this institution. And to be able to do that, I had to dig into various files, and many of you I contacted over the last while just to pick up some of the information because I really do want to give you that particular history. And then to give you that history, we really have to look. Well, we're going to look at yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I'm going to start with today. I'm going to start with today because the group of people that work at this institute are very experienced, okay, and have the expertise to conduct top-notch, world-changing, practice-changing clinical trials. So I'm going to start with today. But to be able to understand where we are today, of course, we have to look at our roots. We have to look at that evolutionary process as we move to some of the expertise that we have today. And then we always have tomorrow because there's a lot of things on the horizon, okay, that we have to be aware of that could impact the way that we do randomized controlled trials. Okay, so let me give you the individuals. Engaged investigators. We have experienced expertise investigators who want to do clinical trials. That's number one. Number two, we have research managers, we have project managers, and we have site coordinators that are experienced and know what they're doing. We have data managers and we have clinical trial biostatisticians, and I emphasize clinical trial biostatisticians, those who know the nuances associated with statistics as it relates to clinical trials. We have that here. We have an IT staff to make sure our data is safe and we communicate with the rest of the world. We have a responsive REB. We have a knowledgeable administrative staff, okay, to help us out with finances and things on that line. And all of these things didn't come by happen chance. They came through experience. Now, just to show you where we sit today, now I'm going to be, some of these slides are going to be very dense. Okay, and I don't want you to read all the lines. I'll highlight some of the key points for you, but really what I really want you to do is just to see the volume, which I think is important. And I'm going to start out just with the trials that we have in our databases that are currently collecting information and data for that study. And there's 47 of them. Okay, so I'm not going to go through them all. There's 47 of them. Just to give you the layout of this particular slide, on the left-hand column is the acronym for the study. Then we have the title. Then we have the investigator we identified for the study. Somebody can get this working, that'd be nice. Then we have the databases that are involved and whether it's a regulated study or not. A regulated study means it could go through Health Canada oversight. It'd be a drug that's used off indication for a phase 3 usually type of study. Let's take a look at some of these. It's not working up on here. Can Katie get it? No, it's not the changing. It's the mouse. Yeah, that's there. That's going to make it easier. I won't have to go back and forth in my head. Okay, so on this particular slide, we have, well, we're still doing the image heart failure study. We got image 1A, okay? We got 1B is done, 1C is done, but image 1A is done. And actually, it's still in liquid, it's in liquid office, which we don't use anymore. We have CHASM RCT. This is a very interesting one because this is the one that generated our insights, which we're going to have to worry about tomorrow with respect to clinical trials. We have COAST AF, CHR funded study. We have Rapid Extend. You're going to see a lot of rapid studies here with Dr. So. We got DAPA STEMI. We're going to see a lot of studies here with Dr. LeMay. Then we got an interesting series of 3 studies in cardiac surgery. Titan SVS, Titan Head Start, and Titan Commence. And Dr. Budwani wants to put these particular studies together in what's known as a platform trial. Okay, sometimes they're called umbrellas, sometimes they're called baskets. So that's going to be an interesting one to see how it evolves, and it'll be very instructive, I think, for doing studies in the future. Then we have MIST, which is another study that's in the cardiac surgery. We just finished all the data. Dr. Uwell has written up a paper and it's being submitted as we speak. AWARE 2, okay, so Dr. Nair's continuous foray into looking at ablation and atrial fibrillation. So he's got AWARE was funded and now AWARE 2 is funded. I'm not going to go through them all. We got Capital Do Re Mi. So Dr. Matthews and Hibbert, their group did this. We have two studies, which are the RPM CID and the RPM PPM. These particular studies are actually Parkash, Dr. Parkash, who's in Dalhousie. The study is being coordinated out of the Heart Institute, and we're involved in the study. But this is an example of one where we can coordinate here to help someone in our area. LA Clotted is one that we're going to be doing with the emergency department and Dr. Steele. Dr. Chow is going to be involved in that. We have Cadence, we have Aerial and Aerial International are an interesting combination. Aerial was known as a feasibility study. So Dr. Chi started this out by seeing whether it's feasible to be able to recruit, feasible to be able to implement and get to the data that we wanted. And then what we had to do was time it right to go to CHR to do the international one. So it's gone from a small feasibility study, then the data gets rolled into the larger international study. So that was just recently funded for a few $1 million. COPAS, which is Dr. Masika's, again, colchicine, it's got to be the wonder drug of the world. It seems to be involved in everything. We have DELCO, which is another dapagliflozin study with Dr. Patterson, and CARA-VT, which is very similar to our VANTAGE study that Dr. Redpath is setting up. I'm nearly through the list. What should I highlight here? Mariners, another Dr. Cheese study. And then we have Vantage 2 extension. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that later. That's kind of a very interesting study. Okay. And then we have a number of studies that are in the heart and the rehab area. Okay, so again, I just want to show you the 47 studies that we're currently collecting data on. Either it's being collected in DASIMA, okay, or REDCap. Now with a regulated study, we could use either one because we've actually have validated the REDCap database. So we passed Health Canada muster. DASIMA has a few more bells and whistles than REDCap, but you can use either one. Okay, now let's see the publications out of this because it's one thing to run the studies. What about publications? So I gave you two groups of publications out of studies that have stopped in the last 5 years and have published. I got one slide for New England Journal of Medicine articles, and I got another slide looking at JAMA articles. Okay, so in the New England world, we have early AF, which is looking at cryoablation for atrial fibrillation. We have the Do Re Mi study, which is looking at milderone and the treatment of cardiogenic shock. We have early AF progression. So this was actually from the same study. We got two New England Journal articles because one looked at the downstream progression of individuals who were on cryoablation. We have rapid long-term outcome. RAFT long-term outcome. And basically, we had the RAFT study, which was conducted here over a 7-year period, published in 2010. We then went back and looked last year at individuals to see if they were alive or dead, and actually published that. And by the way, you may have read the article. There is a differential better mortality if you were on the ICD CRT device and RAFT than if you were just on the ICD device 14 years later. Vantage 2, which is another ablation study versus drugs, looking at ventricular tachycardia, and then the Ocean study, which we have Mr. Ocean in the back row there, which was just recently published. And then in the JAMA world, we have Capital Chill. One of the many studies that have been done at the Heart Institute looking at the effects of moderate or mild hypothermia. We have Safari STEMI, which I know that many of you participated in over a long number of years, looking at radial versus femoral access. aware. So this again is Dr. Nair's study. The first aware has now been published. As I said, he's now working on the second one. We have barrier protect. We have a study opportunity, which is in the rehab area, looking at high intensity interval training HIT, which is done with Dr. Reed. And we have JAMA surgery with rapid cabbage, which is Dr. So's study. And I'm going to highlight this study later on because it's what's known as a non-inferiority study, which is a type of study that we often look at. Okay, so just one comment about core competencies. As I said, with all these type of studies that have been implemented, finished, currently going on, that's where you build expertise in all these particular areas. And I'll just bring up about the data managers and clinical trial biostatisticians. We had a postgraduate student in CanStat, which is a program that takes a statistician, immerses them in the clinical trial world to create a clinical trial biostatistician. It was one of these large patient studies that was funded by CIHR. And we had them here. And it just showed you the richness. These are all the competencies that they wanted us to cover. They didn't think any student could get all these competencies in 1 year. But with the breadth of studies that we have, studies that are starting up, studies that are ongoing, studies that are about to be published, he actually got experience in all these areas. So again, it just shows you that this is a very dynamic, evolving clinical trial experience that someone can have here at the Heart Institute. Yesterday, this was a tough one. Okay. My eyes are bulging in my head because I've been going through all the information I could try to put together to give us yesterday. I got back to the mid 80s, which I thought was not too bad. But anyway, let me show you that it's like pieces of a puzzle. Okay, I started out by asking people if they could recall. Okay, so I asked the various division chiefs, asked the CEO of our institute, can you tell me what's going on that you can remember? And I also asked investigators. I also got very interesting information from Alison Conley, who gave me all the funded studies in the last 10 years. And then she even pushed it further, which was really tough. She gave me the publication list, okay, all the way from 1984 to basically last year. Okay, so these were the pieces I put together. And what I was looking for randomized controlled trials. I was looking for trials that were either designed and led by the University of Ottawa Heart Institute researcher, or it was being coordinated here at our institute. Okay, so they were all the ingredients. Now, if I miss somebody, I miss the study, or if I list the study but I don't talk about it, I apologize. But it is a potentially long list. Okay, so if I had a TARDIS and I could go where I wanted to go back in time, I would do so, but I don't. All I have was the puzzle pieces. So I started out with the puzzle piece that was on a publication list. And I ran into my first problem. Here's the problem: numbers. 97 for half of the 1980s. I had 563 entries for 1990s. I had 1,121 for the early 2000s. Later 2000s, 2416, and this year, this decade, 2184. And again, I had to search through these, find the RCTs. Some of them were on the borderlines. That meant I had to look them up, read them, make sure they're an RCT or not. So it's not a fail-safe process. So I may have missed them. But let's start out. Let's start with the 1980s. The first study I got, and these are the only two in that list, was, well, I had two studies. One was published in Circulation. The other one was published in Catheterization and Cardiovascular Diagnoses. The names here, I won't put all the pictures up, but I'll give you some. There's certainly Dr. Keon was involved in the one in 1985, along with the real Dr. Beanlands, along with our first R. Davies. So this is Ross Davies. And then we also have Rick Davies. We always seem to get these combinations. So I'm glad that Rick often goes by RF. And you'll see his publications throughout the years, not only then, but even more recently. And then we have Michelle LeMay. Okay. Two of them, unfortunately, have passed away. Two of them have retired. But Dr. LeMay is like that ever-ready funny. He keeps going and going and going. Okay, so you're going to see his name going through. Now, I highlighted one in blue because the blue one is the one I'm going to talk about. Okay, that's one I just want to mention a little bit about. So this was the urgent surgical reperfusion in acute evolving MI, a randomized controlled trial. And you have to remember that back in the 80s, randomized controlled trials weren't exactly the thing to do. So this was good forward looking on their part. We have the other part of the institute that I think is very important is on this the 5 people involved in the study. 2 were cardiac surgeons, 2 were cardiologists, shows you the integration among the 2. And the real doctor here is Dr. Neer, who's a biostatistician. So then we had combinations of expertise, clinical expertise, and we had the methodological expertise in there. So basically what they did was they took participants, were patients presenting to the emergency department, um, uh, within 4 hours of a severe chest pain, and it was indicated to be possibly acute evolving myocardial infarction. The randomization, they were going to randomize people either into the intervention arm, which is the reperfusion immediately, or a control arm, medical looking at it from the medical side. When they looked at things like the ejection fraction or the wall motion, sorry, the average wall motion scores, you can see that there's no difference between the two. The medical and the surgical were very similar, and a lot of these non-significant values came up. They did notice a little bit of difference, maybe more in the medical arm were dying versus the surgical arm. But they only looked over a 3-month period. And their conclusion was that doing urgent surgical reperfusion was safe. Maybe it wasn't any more effective in terms of the ejection fraction and reperfusion components, but it did appear to possibly save lives. Okay, now let's go on to the 90s. Okay, now there's a longer list. I can't go through them all. You can see people like Rick Davies involved. You'll see that there's a lot of studies came out of the anesthesia group, Dr. Nathan at the time. And Dr. Nathan, as you'll see, is going to do a lot of studies in the area of normal a mild and moderate normal thermia and so on and so forth. And that's important for something I'll bring up later. Then we have articles in JACC, Annals of Thoracic Surgery. You'll notice that you'll see Fraser Rubin's name and later on Dr. Budwani's name that will be working with Nathan. I think that's an important ingredient as it related to cardiac surgery trials later on. The study I want to look at, though, is one in CMHA in 1999 led by Bob Reed. Okay, Bob Reed was a clinical psychologist who now retired that worked in the cardiac rehab group. Okay, this was a study that would evaluate the incremental benefit of adding telephone counseling for smoking cessation on top of everything else. Okay, you had things like physician services, and you had nicotine replacement, and you had all that sort of stuff. And they wanted to put telephone on top of it to see if it made any difference. That was a tall order to try to beat that. This is basically their study. They randomized individuals into either the a telephone arm or the standard arm, and they followed them through to look at smoking cessation down the road. Basically, they didn't find a difference. Okay, they found that in the control group, the intervention group, which were a couple of hundred in each group, which is the larger study, and you'll see that after 52 weeks, the absence rate between the two are very similar, and there's no statistical difference. Okay, and they basically just say that in their conclusions that it was tough to beat the combinations of physician advice on top of and nicotine replacement therapy to try to win on this one. But the important thing about this study is that it set off, in my mind, the start of an odyssey. Okay, an odyssey in cardiac rehab. They've done studies in smoking. They've done studies in exercise. They've done studies in women's health. They've done studies in nutrition. They've done studies in psychology, have a wide breadth of expertise in those areas. And they've published a lot. They've created a lot of studies and they publish a lot of studies. I'm going to show you 3 or 4 slides just to show you the volume, just to give you an idea. And this particular information, it was good that from Dr. Carrie Ann Mullen, very organized, gave me the list. Okay, so you'll notice as you go down that you got all the various studies, you got the PIs, you got the publications. You'll notice that there's a lot of Dr. Reed's and Pipe in that group. Then you start to get psychology with Dr. Tulloch being involved, and again. Reed and Piper involved. Then we get another Reed coming along. Okay, slightly different. So Dr. Jennifer Reed instead of Dr. Bob Reed. So the Reeds get you kind of get lost in the reads. But anyway, and her area really is in exercise. Okay. And then along the line as this is going on with people like Sophia Papadakis, they started to evolve the Ottawa smoking bubble, okay, which all of us, which is known worldwide actually. Okay, again, read, bunch of reads. And then we start to get Dr. Hassan Mir joined. Okay, so he brought, again, interest in the area of smoking in particular, but wider areas than that. Okay, and it goes on. And you can see that all the studies up to the top 2 were published. All the other studies are ongoing and are part of that list of 47 that I showed you. So I thought this was, I think, an area that's very interesting. Okay, let's go down to the 2000s. Okay, so again, I've listed the articles here. We can certainly make them available. I think the organizers can, for people who want to look at it. I'm going to highlight the younger Dr. Beanland's Part 2 study. That's why it's in blue. But let me just show you the list here. When you look at this list, keep an eye on these types of studies where you see both Howard Nathan and Fraser Rubens involved. Okay, and then Dr. Budwani became involved in that group as well. Okay, but we have other studies in there like capital AMI and so forth. But just keep an eye on that. You can see Budwani and Rubens and Nathan. Okay, I want to come back to that after I go through the Part 2 study. And again, you can see Budwani with Nathan, okay, through that section. So there's a very close connection between cardiac anesthesia and cardiac surgery on this. Okay, let's take a look at the Part 2 study. Objective, okay, to assess the effectiveness of FDG PET assisted management in patients with severe ventricular dysfunction and suspected coronary disease. Okay, the rationale is given here. It's a good rationale. Basically, patients may benefit from revascularization, but there could be significant perioperative morbidity. So they wanted to use PET to see if they could detect viable myocardium, and that might recover after revascularization. So in their study, they're going to randomize individuals either into FDG PET assisted management, so to provide advice, if you wish, to the treating physician or surgeon for downstream ways of doing things, or standard care. Okay, so there's patients, these are the types of patients they're interested in, and patients are going to be randomized 1-to-1 to either of these 2 groups, and a couple of hundred in each of the 2 groups. The primary outcome was a composite of cardiac death, MI, or recruitment to recurrent hospitalizations over a 1-year period. The results, okay, well, you can see that in terms of the primary outcome, 30% in one group, 36% in the standard arm. The relative risk, I mean, it was leaning towards PET, but not statistically significant. Here's the hazard ratio, again, showing over time there was some separation, but again, well, we are seeing some significance in those with a reduction, okay, in the PET group. Okay. So the conclusion. The study did not demonstrate a significant reduction in cardiac events in patients with LV dysfunction as suspected coronary disease for, again, the FDG PET-assisted management versus standard care. For those who adhere to PET recommendations and in patients without recent angiography, significant benefits were observed. These are the ones we see there and illustrated in the graph. the utility of the FDG PET is best realized in this particular subpopulation and when adherence to recommendations can be achieved. Because again, you're giving the advice. It doesn't necessarily mean that the physicians who are treating the patients will follow the advice. Now, this is the other thing. I mentioned about Budwani and Rubens and Nathan, because there was this very close relationship between cardiac anesthesiology and cardiac surgery. These are just a repeat of some of the different types of studies that they did. And I think because of this relationship between the two, Howard Nathan was very interested in clinical trials. And I think that working with the at that time, the younger surgeons really got their interest in it. And it was really interesting what happened actually in cardiac surgery. I have to thank Alice Black to give me these particular slides. So I call this the evolution of cardiac clinical trials. Okay, so they started out with a little stick, and the stick became a bigger stick, and then the bigger stick took over the world. Okay, and I think you'll see that progression. So we have a number of multi-center cardiac studies, cardiac surgical studies, led mostly by Budwani and Ruel. And I can't emphasize how important this is because often in surgery, you do not see surgeons. It's usually, I know this is being recorded. It's usually, well, I know what the result is. We cut, we don't cut, or something like that. But they really are interested in the drugs and the processes of surgery, as you'll see with other studies, and it's taken this up. Then there's a number of, there are the multi-center ones. Then we have a number of soul cyclers, okay? Again, mostly with Ruel and Dr. Chan in this particular case. And then they have a bunch of studies that have been completed. Some of these in the area that when Dr. Budwani worked with Dr. Nathan and others more recently. So you can see that there's a nice long, interesting evolution here going from getting to say, yeah, I can really do randomized controlled trials in the surgical area to doing simple studies to doing multi-center studies. And a particular multi-center study right now, which is missed under Dr. Ruel, he's the leader of an international study looking at, and I'll come back to that later, that area. Okay. Now we're into the 2010s. Okay. I have to say that I got to call this, I may be a bit biased in this area, so I have to watch myself. The decade of electrophysiology, the decade of doing something either with devices or ablation for atrial fibrillation. I put up 4 studies here. The first one is the RAF study, which I want to talk about. The next one are the bruise control, which is Dr. Burney's study. Then Vanish, which again is done by Dr. Sapp, okay, in Dalhousie, but it's run out of the Heart Institute. And then there's again bruise control too. Okay, all 4 of these are related to things with devices and ablation techniques for atrial fibrillation. Let's take a look at RAFT. Okay, so the question in RAFT was CRT benefits patients with left ventricular systolic dysfunction and a wide QRS complex. Most of these patients are candidates for an implantable defibrillator, an ICD. We evaluated whether adding the CRT on top of the ICD, as well as optimal medical therapy, might reduce mortality and morbidity in these patients. And that's basically what the objective of RAF was all about. So determine whether the addition of CRT, ICD, and medical therapy would reduce mortality and hospitalization. Okay. And this will be in patients, again, who are New York Heart Association class 2 or 3. Eventually, we went just with 2s, left ventricular systolic dysfunction, and a wide QRS complex. So, a long list of who was eligible, but this was done in 24 centers, okay, in Canada, 8 centers in Europe and Turkey, and 2 centers in Australia. So this was a true international, large, randomized controlled trial coordinated out of the Heart Institute. Okay, the randomization was 1-to-1. After you got the CRT ICD, the CRT on top of ICD and optimal medical therapy, or whether you just got the ICD and optimal medical therapy. The outcomes we're interested in were either death, very hard clinical outcome, or hospitalization for heart failure that was longer than 24 hours. So that was the result there. What were the results? On the left-hand side, you have the composite outcome of death and hospitalization. On the right-hand side, you have death. Okay, so you can see the separations of the lines. The statistics will tell you that the hazard ratio, okay, that you're better off. You have less composite outcome, less death if you're in the ICD CRT. And that was basically the conclusion. Now, this was, I think, believe the first trial that actually showed a difference in mortality, okay, over this period of time for these patients. Okay, there's other studies here that that did happen in the 20 teens. There's oh, sorry. These are the sub-studies. So with any large study, you can have sub-studies. So these are 6 sub-studies that came out of the RAS study. Out of the bruise control 1 and 2, these are 4 sub-studies that came out of the bruise control study. And you can see that Dr. Essebag, Vidal Essebag from Montreal, I think I would say that Dr. Bernie's probably his mentor. They're very closely connected, and he gave Dr. Essebag a lot of the sub-studies, again, which were run out of this institution. And then we have sub-studies advantage. So you can see these large studies also have a lot of sub-studies. Now, again, we do have studies that are of a different nature. So, for example, Cascade was conducted by the cardiac surgeons and completed. And capital STEMI, STEMI MI, capital reload. These are studies that Dr. Beanlands and Dr. Dr. LeMay were involved in. Okay. And here's some more. I'm running out of time. And here's some more. Okay, so they're all the studies that were done there. Now, these are the studies of the 20s. 2025, well, 20 to 25. And just to reiterate, this was what we had at the very beginning when I said what was published. So the JAMA Cardiology published a Safari STEMI study, Dr. LeMay's study. And remember, Dr. LeMay's picture was back there in 1980. The New England Journal article looked at Milderone. Again, this is Dr. Matthews in group. We had a study by the calibration group with Dr. Andrade. We had Dr. LeMay's capital chill study was published. JAMA Network, which was the HIT study with Dr. Reed, Jennifer Reed. Then there was the AWARE study that was published by Dr. Nair. We had the another Andrade one looking at progression on calibration. We had the SAP study looked at the Vanish, looking at ablation versus drugs for that area. Then I got 2 studies here highlighted. Let me go through the 2 studies. One at the very top, I just mentioned it very briefly. This is fascinating. Looked at some of the major centers that recruited for RAFT. Went back, okay, 14 years later, and said to them, find out where these people are alive or dead, which we did. And we actually found a statistical difference, okay, between those who are on CRT ICD versus those just on ICD, okay, 14 years later. Now that's fascinating because you have to remember that during that 14-year period, you can make it, your device may change. Okay, other things are happening to you in your life. Okay, and yet we still saw the difference. Okay, between the 2 groups. When we started this, I thought there was be no way, but there was a way, which was nice. Okay, I'm not sure if Dr. So's in the audience. Oh, there he is. Okay, I put this up for him because he loves non-inferiority studies. Not. Anyway, so he decided he's going to do a non-inferiority study. I'm going to highlight this one. Early versus delayed bypass, okay, in patients with ACS receiving ticagrelor. Okay, so basically, you want to evaluate whether if you got early CABG, uh, surgery 2 to 3 days after ticagrelor versus waiting the 5 to 7 days, which is the more standard way of doing it, would it make a difference? So his initial thoughts was that he wanted to shorten that period from 5 to 7 days down to 2 to 3 days. Okay, so he didn't expect the 2 to 3 days to beat the 5 to 7 days. Is that right, Doctor? And so he was going to do a non-inferiority study. So this is a special study, which is becoming more and more popular because as we get more effective treatments, we it's harder for your new treatment to be better, but it may be just as good as, but it's got a lot of other attributes, maybe less side effects, less burden for the patients, better uh, operating terms of organization of the hospital to deal with patients. So if we can get it 2 to 3 days after 5 to 7, show it's not worse in terms of bleeding and so on and so forth, that would be good. And so he conducted this. All right. So he did 2 centers. I think it was here at Ottawa at the Heart Institute, and then one in Montreal. It's got a long list of eligibility criteria there, which I won't go into. He basically did one-to-one randomization, putting individuals in this quicker 2 to 3 days stopping versus 5 to 7 days after ticagrelor. And again, what he's hoping is that this will not be too much worse than that in terms of things like bleeding. Okay, so he looked at the universal definition of perioperative bleeding, UDPD. I think he really should have, I think in his heart of hearts, after he looked at it a little bit closer, maybe looked at 24-hour chest tube drainage being more interesting. And he also looked then at other outcomes such as the length of stay and so forth. Okay, so what happened to this? Okay, so this is the result. Now, in a non-inferiority study, one of your populations you looked at is called per protocol, i.e. patients who came into the study, lasted in the study, okay, and you got the results at the end, as opposed to intention to treat. You can do both. Per protocol is the one we often look at, certainly initially. And so these are the results. So we looked at severe or massive UDPD, so the perioperative bleeding. You saw that the early group, okay, trying to get them in quick, there was 4.6%. The delayed group was 5.2%. And so he only found a difference of 0.6%, which was good. Very tight confidence, relatively tight confidence interval. And then what he says is what's non-inferior? Now he chose 8% as being non-inferior. In other words, if the upper bound of the 95% confidence interval was under 8%, he'd say, I'm not losing much. Okay, if I went early versus delayed, and therefore let's maybe early is a better way of going. That's basically what it is. You also looked at, as you can see, he made it. Also looked at chest tube drainage. Okay, and he found again that on the non-inferiority, he significantly got the job done. And then with things like hospital stay, did superiority. So his conclusions. This study found that early surgical strategy 2 to 3 days after ticagrelor cessation was non-inferior to incurring perioperative bleeding. The data support a reduction in the delay between ticagrelor cessation and CABG surgery and may decrease hospital length of stay. Okay, very powerful. And what was really nice about this is that you notice the confidence intervals for those who are in confidence intervals is relatively wide, but the study basically ran on and on and on. It's becoming more and more difficult to do it. So even though it was only a pilot, which is going to lead to a larger one, he published on the pilot, and I think made a good difference. I hope, Dr. So, that I presented that to your liking. I won't give you some of the comments he made about non-inferiority studies, which he said he'll never conduct another one. All right. It's enough. Okay, that thing that's covered is all our expertise over the years. Is it enough? I don't think it is enough. I don't think it is enough. And I'll tell you why. Okay. We got a really interesting experience with a couple of one study in particular, where we found out that even though we're a small enterprise compared to, say, large pharma, Health Canada will hold us to the same level of what they expect in a trial. So even though You've got large pharma that will have 50 people just doing monitoring analysis around the world. Um, we're held to the same standard because it's the safety of the patients we have to worry about. So getting this Health Canada uh, uh, oversight review really opened our eyes to a number of different aspects of running clinical trials that we have to be aware of. And you have to remember that in addition to things like data management, statistics, and everything else that the research coordinators, there's other aspects as well. There's the imaging. Okay, so we have a number of different core labs, I think 5. Okay, and all of them have to be functioning in a way that if Health Canada comes in and examines one of our projects, then we're going to have to be able to pass muster. Now, the projects that are highly likely to be reviewed by Health Canada are ones that will have a drug that's used off indication, such as dapagliflozin and Dr. LeMay's and Dr. Patterson's study. Studies that are phase 3, which again, they fall under, and studies that may be multi-center. So I don't know what process they decide which studies they're going to look at, but they're the 3 ingredients that we feel will be there. Okay, so what do we have to do? We have to up our game. So just in terms of the database side, we developed SOPs, one to work with Vasima software, one to work with RedCap. Okay, and this big flow diagram takes you through the SOP on all the various stages. Okay, and so at the very beginning, the data managers and the biostatisticians, along with the project managers and the investigators, get together to make sure that we can get this to flow. So we wrote the SCPs. We also have a compliance office. Okay, so the Office of Clinical Research and Compliance. That's the website. They've just updated everything on HeartHub. They have 8 different sections that they talk about. I'm not going to talk about them all. In fact, I'm just going to highlight 2. I'm going to talk about the regulatory compliance, getting ready for regulatory inspections. Okay, clinical trial applications, clinicaltrials.gov, making sure that everything from the official documentation perspective is taken care of, and review of core facilities to make sure that everything from imaging to data to animals are taken care of. The other one is the startup and conduct support. So this could be a two-edged sword. On one side, they could certainly help you to get start up with getting maybe that initial REV in, for example, and so forth. But then again, it also presents issues that they're going to review your initial protocol looking at GCP compliance, okay? And we're going to have to see how that works out, because I think that's a heavy lift, in particular for studies that may not be Health Canada compliant. Sorry, Health Canada oversight. So that brings us to the next to last slide. So for regulated studies, we really have to look at the Health Canada regulations. We have to look at the ICP, GCP standards, so the International Conference on Harmonization, to look at risk-based monitoring. We also have to look at for non-regulated studies, maybe following the WHO guidance. And monitoring is the big issue. You have a multi-center study and collecting data from Calgary. Okay, there has to be some type of monitoring to make sure that the data is accurate and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's it. That's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yesterday, I hope you got a good feeling about this jigsaw puzzle that was put together. On today, I think that hopefully you recognize all the expertise that we have within this building. And then finally, for tomorrow, we have to worry about things like compliance. We have to worry about things like SOPs. And the other one I added at the bottom, because I know I wouldn't have time to talk about it, is we have to be aware of the current statistical and issues related to design analysis of these types of studies. With that, that's it.
Thank you. Are we on? Can you guys hear me? Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wells. That was amazing. I learned a lot. I know these acronyms and these studies, but hearing kind of particularly the the backstory, the side chats, I think is very interesting and very important. Questions from the audience, and we're going to pass around the microphone just because this is actually also I forgot to mention at the beginning these are being recorded, so if ever you miss one, you can go back and watch them. So we're going to use the microphone for the sake of the recording. Questions?
George, thank you for your leadership and support of all of many of the trials that you presented. It's an incredible body of work. And I think you can see, I like that slide that showed the number of trials that kept increasing. So as we've passed through time, we've recognized the value and importance of clinical trials as being the most robust form of evidence to drive clinical decision making. And you've always been an advocate for that. So first of all, thank you for that and your leadership. So with the Health Canada review, we learned that there's things that we need to be doing. We need to make investments to enable that. The cost of trials is going up. Yet there are potential ways, especially with you didn't touch on it, you put it in red at the end, on some of the contemporary ways we can look at analyses and approaches to clinical trials that may be a little bit more cost effective to run. And I wondered if you could comment on that.
So I'll give you an example with the Titan studies where we're putting the three together. What you do is you look for commonality across the studies. So maybe there could be, common approaches and specific data that's being collected. Could be common ways that you could run your DSMBs, all one DSMB to do it. So we're really looking more and more into the platform trials and looking at the Titan as being an example of one. So I think that this is a way. You'll notice that we talk about capital this, capital that, and rapid this and rapid that. I think a lot of these could be packaged into either what's called a basket trial, an umbrella trial, or a platform trial. I think that's one way. You're right about the cost going up, and they're going to even get more because if we have to do this monitoring, and we have to figure out the best way of doing it to make sure that Health Canada's happy, and the best way of getting it through CIHR or wherever we're getting the dollars, that's the biggest one that concerns me. Okay, that particular one. I think we also become more efficient as we get more experience. Okay, in particular our data managers and our biostatisticians, they again, learning from experience. Okay, they know where the inefficiencies are and make that more efficient. And so forth. I think the other thing that's important is to have something like the compliance office. You saw the list of items I put there. Again, if they can take clinicaltrials.gov off your shoulders, if it gets up and running again, if they can take, some of the ABCs of getting the REB initially done, that takes money off you in terms of your operating staff. So I think there's a way of making it efficient. Everything can be made more efficient. But the other big ingredient I think that we're looking at now, we have to look at it more, are trials that we got one through the FDA recently where it was approximately 300 in each arm. Okay. And one arm was the new stuff, the new approach, the new treatment that they wanted to get out. And the other one was the standard one. Okay. So what we did was we had 300 we're going to get randomized into the new stuff. 100 we're going to get randomized into the standard. Okay. And then we use the database, okay, to what we call propensity match individuals in that database to the ones in the 100 group. So we augmented the control group, okay, with these extra 200s. I think that could be a big bonus going forward. So we have a lot of very good databases. We have people here who can work with these large databases. And maybe what we can do is look for in our registries and the databases, people that look like our control group, but will be propensity matched. So it's kind of a hybrid RCT. So, but that's one of the ways we're. Yep.
Thanks, George. I don't actually have a question. I just have a couple of comments. And number one, I think Katie's
Sorry,
introduction.
David, can you speak up a bit? I just noticed that I didn't have my hearing aids
Okay,
on.
I'm sorry. I don't have
I
a
never heard of a
question. I
doctor
don't have a
without the hearing
question. I
aid.
just have a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I really think that Katie's introduction to you rather understated your achievements. I think your achievements are just utterly remarkable. I always thought that my own grants, if it, probably would have got a 4.0, and you were the one who made it 4.3 and 4.4 and took it over the bar. I have no doubt. Another one was just an anecdote. If you ever submit a paper to New England Journal of Medicine, the review process is unbelievable. They send it out to 4 clinical reviewers and a statistical reviewer. And when I sent Bruise Control out, the 4 clinical reviewers had 10 pages of questions, and the statistical reviewer had 1 question. It just was remarkable because you designed the trial so perfectly. So
Oh,
those are my comments.
that's good.
Any other comments? I have a question, George, actually, about you sort of touched on it a bit at the end when you were talking about maybe using sort of propensity matching and things like that. But I'm thinking about that and where you see sort of the synthetic trials, those types of trials going, are you seeing them
Yeah.
increasing in frequency? Like, is that going to become something where we're going to have to do alongside? What's your thought there?
Yeah, the synthetic trials are interesting. So basically, you create your synthetic populations. They do this a lot in AI and so on and so forth. And the methodology, it'd be good to get more into synthetic trials. And we have people at the university that I've worked with that will do that. The other area that we really have to work a little bit more on are on Bayesian statistics. Okay, so it's actually so Bayesian statistics is what we usually think of statistics with confidence intervals and so on and so forth. It's what we call your classical frequentist approach. With the Bayesian statistics, you take a guess at the beginning what you think it's going to be. You then collect your data, and on the basis of your data set, how was my guess? Okay, if your guess was good or not good, you go through this cycle of updating and updating. Now, sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the Bayesian statistics are often used in adaptive trials. And I found it fascinating when I went through the trials that one of the trials that Dr. Rick Davies did back in the early 90s was basically an adaptive trial, okay, where he basically said, we're going to put people on something. We're going to assess to see how they're doing. If they're not doing it, we're going to do something else, okay? And that's an adaptive approach. So the adaptive approach requires Bayesian statistics. The adaptive approach really can be helped by synthetic trials. That's a long, but
Oh, that's fantastic. Any other comments, questions for George? If not, thank you so much for kicking off this year, and thank you for everything you do to support trials at the Heart Institute.
thank you.